Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Kevin Dolan, and I am the writer and author of Little Fag, A Journey of Self-Acceptance and Healing. And today I will read Chapter 12, entitled Distrust Exhibits Itself Freely. Begins on page 77 in my memoir. Dear, I know I promised I'd attend your graduation dinner, but my teeth are still sore, shared my mom. She had had a number of extractions about a week before my junior high school graduation, but she did promise to come with me. Sore teeth. Yet another excuse from Mom. Yet another broken promise to me. I became accustomed to it. Adults lied. As I grew older, I did the same, leaving trails of excuses and broken promises in my wake. No one had shown me a different way of being. To be normal meant to be unreliable. This narrative changed because of one elementary school teacher. I adored him. He would impart the kind of practical wisdom I didn't know I was craving, advice from which I would happily give up playing at recess. With him supervising the playground one recess, I chose to walk with him. He shared, "You see, Tommy, people will be drawn to you if they know you keep your promises. But you have to keep your promises to yourself first." Profound words for my young ears. I was constantly seeking recognition. A pat on the head for being good, or if for not being good, then at least to soothe the fear, confusion, embarrassment, and shame I felt for every promise broken, for every lie caught. I remember my beloved teacher every time I honor a promise to another and every time I honor a promise to myself. What I braved, what made no sense to me living with an alcoholic father, was how unconscious my mom could be at times. And of course, that wackiness was taught to all of us. I knew she loved him, or at least I thought she did. When you love someone, it's natural to want to help. But if you love an alcoholic, the desire to help causes more harm than good. Under the veil of thinking, life wouldn't be so overwhelming if you helped. I remember doing some of the things so Dad would stop drinking, or at least making sure no one knew he was. Myself and siblings at times would make excuses about why he didn't work, or dig deep into our pockets to make up for his inability to pay the bills. We further enabled him by covering up his unacceptable behavior in front of other people and doing much more than our share to make up for Dad's failure to meet his responsibilities. I discover with the use of a genogram, a graphic representation of a family tree that displays detailed data on relationships among individuals, that I would become the surrogate husband and father for my family. The problem was, by doing these things, I was collectively contributing to the disease process. He never got well. He never had to deal with the consequences of his actions. He kept doing exactly what he'd been doing. He kept picking up the pieces and pretending that everything was okay. I cannot begin to imagine the broken promises my mom had to endure. But what was most devastating was how easily she, and then all of us, did the very same thing. And we did that to each other. With little moral compass, there was no true north for any of us. Enabling wasn't always obvious. There's a fine line between enabling and being supportive. When you're being supportive, you're doing things for someone that they can't do for themselves. But when you're enabling, you are habitually doing for people things that they could and should do for themselves. We banded together and enacted these enabling behaviors, all with the desire to stem the pain by putting our own needs aside to continually make excuses for Dad. We'd feel resentful because we were taking on more than our share of responsibilities, and we lied to others and to ourselves about unacceptable behavior. All this time and energy, including bailing Dad out of disasters he created, was expended to get him not to drink. Little of any of this supported that outcome. Whatever he broke or destroyed, we moved heaven and earth to put it back together. No wonder promises meant nothing. What I braved was spending a year and a half with a local chapter of adult children of alcoholics. It took a lot of courage to acknowledge that I was an enabler and I needed to get support. As an enabler, as told by the ACOA group I joined to help me, I needed to stop doing for my dad and family things that allowed the denial of the problem. I found the courage to pay attention to the unhealthy things I was doing. I stopped making excuses and lying for my dad and my family. The rescuing, the bailing out, the covering up, all had to end. My arguments or begging with the intent to change others ended. I learned how to change myself. The unlearning. It was the first birthday celebration of my married life. It was 1985. My wife had promised me a pair of runners. My wife and I met while attending the University of Calgary. We shared a number of classes. Her intellect was stellar, her presence gently commanding. I loved her gentleness and her bright energy, all anchored with a great laugh. Add to that, she was an impeccable athlete. As I unwrapped the box, I remembered thinking, this isn't the shape of a shoebox. It would be the genesis of an expression I would coin to ease my pain. Never judge a gift by the box. After getting through the wrapping paper and lifting the lid off the box, all I remember feeling was a searing pain in my stomach. Next, I heard a whirling, high-pitched whine inside my ears, and then I felt like I was going to pass out. All of a sudden, I felt a part of me rise to the ceiling, and all I could see was a version of myself with my wife beside me, opening the gift. I was terrified. I could barely hear her voice as she asked if I was okay. While experiencing these sensations, feeling scared and floating on the ceiling, I distinctly remember a jovial voice coming from me, answering her by saying, "Yes, I'm fine." Enraged, disappointed, betrayed, and foolish is how I really felt. Now my wife was breaking her promises. It wasn't running shoes. I made up a story that she had lied. I was devastated, but by no means was I going to tell her what was going on because I had no clue myself. The unlearning for me was recognizing the dynamics of being triggered and committing to sharing that with the person I was triggered by. I never could tell my wife when I was triggered. I continued to act like I was fine and continued to feel like I was dying on another level. Enduring a childhood of broken promises had now infected my adult life, and my wife wasn't my only trigger. Most folks don't really understand what being triggered is all about, let alone recognizing when they've been triggered. A trigger is something inside of us or in our emotional environment that evokes a strong physiological or emotional response. It can be something we see, smell, feel, sense, or hear that strongly impacts us for good or ill. That description fit me. I was so easily triggered I couldn't distinguish between one trigger setting me off and the next. I was that charged up on the inside. With gratitude and some work over many therapy sessions on resetting my nervous system, I was able to recognize when I was being triggered and not go into a deeply negative funk. Today, I see being triggered as a chance to do some deep healing work, because I know if it's rising to the surface, it's already impacting me negatively, and likely in ways that I'm not seeing at present. While continuing my therapy work, I sensed I needed to source the truer trigger connected to my birthday. I knew the broken promise trigger, but sometimes something deeper was calling to me. During one of my sessions, as we discussed the dynamics of my birthday, my therapist noticed I wasn't breathing. He gently asked, "Thomas, if you allowed yourself to take a deep breath, what would happen?" As I drew a long breath, which I felt like I'd had to force, I screamed. How could they not remember? Who does that to a child? My head felt like it was going to explode. and my heart felt heavy. Through a shroud of tears, I said, they didn't even get me a birthday cake. That day I discovered the devastation of my birthday in 1968 that never saw the light of day. My older brother got married on June 29th, the day after my birthday, and no one, absolutely no one, remembered my birthday on June 28th. During the courtship leading up to marrying my husband, I sat down with him and shared my issues about my birthday. I remember him with tears in his eyes, grabbing my hand and asking, "How can I support you?" I said to him, although it felt pretty juvenile and immature, could you please give me a birthday card, one wrapped gift, a chocolate birthday cake, and a lovely meal out, just you and I? His eyes dazzled, and he replied, "It would be an honor to celebrate your birthday. I promise to do what you ask." We knew, and ultimately who knew, all I had to do was ask for what I wanted. But to my credit, I was willing to invest in understanding the epicenter of my trigger and be even braver and share with my husband. The celebration and all of my birthdays since have been exactly what I wanted. He's always delivered on his promise. My gift to me for the rest of my birthday celebrations was getting exactly what I wanted. Oh, it took a long time to feel good while married about what was going on for me. And I remember the disconnect between the story of, right, my wife is a liar. My wife was never a liar. I was the one that would make up the story to cover up the pain of being disappointed, right? I'm in my mid to late 20s during that time that I was married. And the circumstances that caused the triggers occurred when I was a little guy, probably 3 to 11 or 12, and maybe even beyond that. So the trigger took a long time to figure out. And I felt bad that I couldn't pull it apart because, of course, the story or the narrative that she was a liar wasn't true, and yet all the feelings connected to this thought that she was a liar were there. It was really hard work to do, right? To understand when the trigger showed up, to be clear and get a sense of what it is my ego wanted to create as far as the story was concerned, be able to breathe like I just did, and then ultimately not undo it, not beat myself up because I found myself in that place, but to bring love to that part of me that had been hurt. And then create a relationship between the adult version of me and that little boy to find out what it is he needed from me in order to feel like he could be celebrated, that he could feel loved, that he could feel that I had kept a promise with him. That was really the deep and powerful work. Because initially, I thought it was work I had to do on the outside, to do work with somebody that had broken the promise. No, it was work I had to do with myself, to find peace within myself. To be okay understanding the trigger, being comfortably uncomfortable with that process, and then be able to walk it back and be able to, and although I didn't know it at that time, and in one of my podcasts I talk about glimmers, which are the opposite of triggers, be able to begin to create more glimmers in my life and experience less triggers. And now when they come up, I know that they're there for me because I have a response in my body. I can use my body to help me understand that a trigger is present. But in all of this mix, through again the wackiness of the Dolans, none of it was ever spoken of. I can imagine at 10 years old, nobody acknowledging your birthday. Nobody speaking of that. Ever. And even in my healing, and not to go after mom and blame her, because that made no sense, right? That got me nowhere, other than in the same place most of my family was in terms of victimization. But I remember almost jokingly, but partially seriously, I said to my mom one day, do you remember my older brother's wedding? Do you remember Rick's wedding? Yes. That day was what? She said, I think the end of June. I said, June 29th. I said, do you remember not celebrating my birthday with me? Nobody celebrating my birthday on June 28th, the day before, when I turned 10. Here's the response I got. Oh dear, don't be so stupid. We would never have done that. I also learned, right, how to actually pick my battles, and as a dear friend says, it wasn't a hill I was going to die on.